We need to make no mistake. It's voluntary for the businesses that choose to use it, but it's going to become mandatory for the Connecticut residents that want to be able to access those businesses. And given that those businesses could be any institution in the state of Connecticut, it's unlimited, we could have situations where there are companies like a CVS, where this was rolled out the other day, could deny access to residents to get prescription drugs, to get goods and services, especially in communities that might be underserved by grocery stores or by pharmacies, that is the only access that these individuals have to those stores. You know, whether it was the Screen to Stay program for our schools or the governor's recent announcement of his executive order on climate initiative, or now this passport program, the governor has rolled out all of these programs without any input for the legislature. And I could continue to ask my Democrat colleagues, when are you going to stop standing on the sidelines and begin to have the conversations of what role the legislature should be playing in these very important policy decisions that are impacting our residents? It's crazy that I could get a contract from the state of New Hampshire on what their passport program is and could scrutinize their document, but I can't get the state of Connecticut's contract. I also could go on the New York website and look at a 58-page PowerPoint presentation that outlines the structure and the impact that it has on their residents. But in Connecticut, we have no information beyond trust us. And what's important here to understand is that this is the government's facilitation of data collection. And we hear in this building all the time the importance of data privacy. When we have discussions about student data or legislation dealing with healthcare, we always pay attention to how that data is aggregated and to what level of privacy is protected. What I want to know about is that once that app is used, how is that person's personal information of consumer preferences, of spending, being captured? I could look at New Hampshire's contract and see those protections in place. I can't do the same for the state of Connecticut. And so that is why we are asking for an informational forum, a public hearing, to be able to ask those questions and to get that information. This is one example, and if you look at other companies, they are reserving the right to sell third-party data. And so whether it's Vincent Candelora's name gets sent, but general consumer habits can be collected through this data, and it could be offloaded to third-party vendors. Connecticut is facilitating businesses to make profits. You know, another example is with the SEMA4 testing. SEMA4 wasn't just about testing for COVID. That is also about data collection. They are collecting all of the residents' genetic materials for every test that is taken in the state of Connecticut. And they've reserved the right to aggregate that data and use it for other purposes. Residents don't have a choice to prevent that from happening, but government does. And so we should have that conversation of, while we continue to embark through COVID, does it make sense to allow third-party vendors who are trying to facilitate and mitigate the spread of COVID? Should government be facilitating the ability for these companies to make millions of dollars off of the data that they're collecting?
So if you were given that information from the governor's office that there would be no transfer of information, data and specifics, would it be necessary to have a public hearing?
I think that, yes. I think historically what we've seen out of the last 2 years, and I think the press here could probably be better testifiers than me, that getting information from the governor's office throughout the pandemic has not been very swift. And so while the governor can be nimble at issuing executive orders, they're not so nimble about providing the data that we want to see how our constituents are impacted.
How about have you, as the House Minority Leader, called the Chief Operating Officer, who seems to be the coordinator here, for a sit-down to ask these very direct questions you have?
Mark, this program was baked before I was put in the position to react to the program. So the bigger problem is the administration continues to implement programs without any input from legislators. So the question shouldn't be, have I asked? The question should be, is the governor sitting down with legislators before they're issuing significant policy changes in the state of Connecticut? So the point is, what we have right now in the state of Connecticut is a structure of releasing programs and not having a dialogue with our legislative colleagues, which should be happening. And I don't put this just on the governor's back. The Democrats in the legislature as well should be asking for this information. It's incredible to me that this governor released an executive order yesterday on climate initiatives that the legislature intentionally chose not to move forward. That he has now decided on his own that these are policies I want to advance today when the legislature said, no, we don't want to do it. And I hear crickets from the other side of the aisle. Now, those policies didn't fail because of Republican opposition. Those policies failed by bipartisan opposition. Where are the Democrats coming to the table to say, we object to this? But to suggest this program is voluntary, it's no big deal, it is a big deal. There are other implications to it. But when we get into the realm of essential services, I am concerned that CVS may choose to deny access to all unvaccinated people. And I think about, even 11-year-old. You want to take your 11-year-old to the grocery store. I guess you got to find a babysitter now if they're not vaccinated. So there's a lot of issues that need to be flushed out.
But do you really believe what you just outlined is realistic? That these large, that these large commercial operations are going to tell customers you can't come in?
It's not a matter of what I believe can happen. It's a matter of us as a government have an obligation to ask these questions before something is rolled out. So again, we're put in a position to hold a press conference after the unveiling of a soft rollout of a program that nobody really understands. And so now we're going to have this conversation of, can a grocery store deny access if it's the only grocery store within 30 miles of residence? And I think those are important questions to have. I want to avoid problems in the state of Connecticut, not create them.